The people who have corroborated this reporting that the Russians offered a bounty for the killing of U.S. soldiers by the Taliban. Sky News has now confirmed it. The New York Times broke the story. It was quickly matched by the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and as you said in your interview, NBC. People denying it are Putin and his spokesperson, and Trump and his spokesgal. I mean, that speaks for itself. My question, though, is why do Russians want American soldiers dead?
70% of Republicans in a recent poll still believe that President Biden did not legitimately win the presidency. And 87% believe voting laws aren't strict enough to prevent illegal votes from being cast, even though there aren't any. That is the rationale behind states in at least 48 states to limit in-person, mail, and election day voting through stricter ID rules and narrower eligibility requirements. A sweeping Republican-backed movement rooted in the big lie. Yet this weekend, Liz Cheney, who has now staked her career on defending democracy by beating back that lie and shining a light on all of its dangers, this week refused to warn about these ones. She passed up the opportunity to hold her own party accountable for baselessly undermining confidence in elections to come. Here she is with our friend Jonathan Swan on Axios on HBO. Watch.
How much culpability do Republican elites have for fertilizing the soil for the big lie?
That's not at all how I think about it. You won't be surprised to hear. I think that when you look at things like voter fraud, it certainly exists. I will never understand the resistance, for example, to voter ID. I think you ought to have to show ID to go vote. There's a big difference between that and a president of the United States who loses an election after he tried to steal the election and refuses to concede.
So Liz Cheney, who has refused to lie about the outcome of the election and lost her job because of it, says these new laws are all okay.
Well, congrats. We've arrived at the part of our story when our hero, reminds her newfound friends on the left, yep, she's still a Republican. And I think there is this tendency to look at any Republican who briefly or in a prolonged way disavows Trump, that they're somehow moderating or moving to the middle or even the left. And in fact, the rejection of Trump is that he wasn't conservative enough. And so, I don't think we should all be surprised when we watch Liz Cheney act like a Republican and sound like the Republicans around her. But to the voter fraud stuff, I mean, how much longer are we going to continue to perform this theatrical nonsense of recounts and audits? I mean, it feels at some point like, I don't know if I can say this. It feels like masturbation. I'm sure it feels good to people in, this wing of the party, but it does not actually end with anything. It might be my last day here. I'm sorry.
No, I just want to tell you that in that 3 seconds where you said that, there were 100 things that went through my head.
Was that one of them?
And I decided that I couldn't say one of them out loud. But I know exactly what you mean.
Only one. Well, it is certainly performative outrage about a non-existent problem.
So exactly what SC was saying.
Exactly what SC just said, right. And as Kirsten noted, these recounts give some legitimacy to this non-existent problem. And what we're seeing with Liz Cheney, she was very clear. She said she wasn't going to go along with the big lie, but now she's making it clear she will go along with a big lie. Maybe
Little
not
lies.
the big lie,
Right.
but this is a pretty big one because she has said that the big lie is a threat to democracy, right? What's a greater threat to democracy than unnecessarily limiting access to voting?
The big lie and all the Republicans who continue to fuel it is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Axios national political reporter Jonathan Swan is here fresh off that interview with Liz Cheney. Also joining us, A.B. Stoddard, associate editor and columnist with Real Clear Politics, and MSNBC political analyst, the former Senator Claire McCaskill is here. Jonathan Swan, it's another stunning interview on your part. And it's almost Trumpian in that section in which you confront her with the facts. The fact is there wasn't any fraud in Georgia or Florida or Arizona. So it has nothing to do with the specifics of these laws. And the specific of the law in Georgia, the most egregious thing a lot of folks feel is to disempower who they're now Republicans, but the election officials who held the line against Donald Trump. It's stunning to me that she wants to lump them in together as solving different problems when what they all have in common is there were no problems. There was no voter fraud.
The reason this is such an important conversation is because
Liz Cheney is fighting, taking a stand against Donald Trump and January 6th and saying that, we need to, that she's going to dedicate herself to opposing the quote unquote big lie that the election was stolen. The problem is she sort of has put this issue into a silo, and she does not acknowledge what came before and what is coming after as being connected to it. So the fact that, and you raised it in your intro, the most important statistic is that 70% of Republican voters believe Joe Biden is illegitimate. And that didn't happen just because Donald Trump said a few things in 2020. This is the result of many years of the Republican Party talking about voter fraud, educating its electorate that this is a rampant problem, that people in the inner cities are voting 4 times, illegal immigrants, all these different things. That's the context. She doesn't acknowledge any linkage between that and what we're seeing right now. And then after the election, we're seeing, I think it's more than 400 now, voting bills that have been introduced in state legislatures around the country, 90% supported by Republicans, some of them supported in court by the Republican National Committee. Why is the Republican Party doing such a broad-scale effort if it was not something that they thought was in their self-interest and beneficial to them? It really beggars belief to sort of say that these things aren't connected.
And, Liz Cheney is, one, smart enough to know that there was no voter fraud, and 2, she's been around long enough to know the people like James Baker and Jimmy Carter looked at it in 2000 and didn't find any. She knows Ben Ginsburg personally. She knows that he's spoken out and written in the newspaper about how, Donald Trump is the only one who came close to committing voter fraud. Why is she fact immune? I mean, if you want to stake your career on rooting out the big lie, and she called it Donald Trump's crusade against democracy. The crusade against democracy is being carried out in the 47 states pushing voter suppression laws. She seems like she's going to lose all of her credibility on waging her own crusade against Donald Trump's assault on democracy.
Well, it did surprise me that she would not acknowledge any link between because there manifestly is. I mean, there's no way that you can plausibly argue that all of these state legislatures, Republican-controlled state legislatures, just out of a burst of spontaneous inspiration individually around the country, a flowering of concern at unprecedented levels, with no attachment whatsoever to the fact that the most powerful and influential Republican in the country has been telling everyone that there's voter fraud, and that some of these bills, some of them, not all of them, some of them have measures that are designed to deal with some of the problems that Trump has said exist. So it's really it's a bit of a stretch to to try and divorce these two things.
Claire McCaskill, I remember when we were all really in awe of the stand she took, and I remain in awe of the stand she took. It cost her position in leadership. But even then, it is intellectually dishonest to pick and choose among the things that bother you about the big lie. The problem with the big lie and the problem with making your opposition about your fears and concerns about our democracy is that arguably the most, other than inspiring extremists who are, according to the Department of Homeland Security, inclined to carry out violent acts, the most egregious and far-reaching thing that the big lie is doing is suppressing the vote in 47 states.